go around the room and just do introductions, like a name, and perhaps a word or a sentence about how folks felt when they heard that Roe was going to be overturned, either the day it happened or when it was leaked, whatever was impactful. And I can do volunteers or victims. I will start rotating.
I'll go first. I'm Jamie Junior. I was unsurprised. Yeah, I was going to say expected, but also ready. Because I feel like organizations like Surface Missouri planning for that. You know, this is worst case scenario, but yeah, ready.
I'm Brett. Frustrated. Everyone knew what was going to happen for a couple months before it did, and it's like just waiting for a train to hit you or something. Really frustrated for the women in my life much more than myself.
Hi, Nancy, she, etc. I have been seething for many, many years because the Equal Rights Amendment was never passed. I have been seething for many, many years because we never codified Roe versus Wade. We let the future of half of the United States population depend on one elderly little bird, brilliant bird of a woman. And if the fact that losing her had this effect means we didn't do our work. Because it never, one person should not be carrying it for anyone. And anyone who blames her for not resigning, she kept saying, we need to codify it. You know, maybe if we codified it, she would have resigned sooner. Who knows? But it shouldn't have rested on her. Yeah. We haven't been doing our work. And I've tried. So I feel very frustrated. Because I don't know what more I could have done.
I'm Francine, and I agree with Nancy and everybody. I was sick. I mean, yeah, we were expecting it, but still, we were out in the streets, and we should still be out in the streets. And, you know, we have to go out in the streets and march and show that we, you know, protest all this stuff. No. Very frustrated, sickening. Anyway, that's what comment.
Ethan, I was surprised, to be honest. Like, sort of disbelief. And then I went to the protest at Planned Parenthood. But, the decision leaked, and there was, we live in the world we live in. It seems like crazier things have happened, but it really felt like there's no way. Del, can we get you to sit in one other seat? We're trying to live stream right now.
Sure.
Any other seat.
It's true that we put up less seats this time. I don't know.
I'm Nick. I guess I felt like the world got turned upside down a little bit because I guess the younger folks in the room are a little luckier of this has always been a right, and the Supreme Court's been in the business of giving rights, and it got taken away, and obviously there's tons of women in my life, sister, mother, fiance, all of you all, friends, and it's just wow, this is, they're really going to keep doing this unless we put up a fight and actually stop it. So.
My name's Rich Henneke, and I live here in the neighborhood. I'm not a member, I generally go Democratic, but my world is, I teach as an adjunct professor at SLU, and so in my world I've also led organizations that are Roman Catholic. So I have a history and rooting there. Now, of course, a lot of times those who are Roman Catholic forget the rest of the gospel that's also proclaimed. And so my other work and my other board positions are about trying to promote that side of the justice that should be there. I have to say that in my class at SLU, most of the students, I think, articulated well their agony and their frustration that we're talking about. Also, the reality of how harmful this was for women who were seeking to have infants whose birth options were now being challenged in terms of the opportunities for that are now at risk with this decision, depending on how things proceed. But I want to also say that in the discourse, and the class was supportive of each other, but one student was on a different perspective, and she articulated well, I thought, and with some courage to say that please don't lump one person's perspective on this with those who have violated other people with this decision and with their approach. So I thought that was useful in terms of my discourse with others and maybe our efforts to change, to change, it should not have to be a change because of one reversing rights, but to change that situation.
I want to repeat that.
Yes, Mr. Taylor, we're just going around an introduction as well as how you felt either on the day that the decision that Roe would be overturned was leaked or when it was actually overturned.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dale Taylor. When I heard that it was being leaked, I have a broad network of friends, and there was always a long discussion about was this really in the purview of the states or not. And I don't want to get into that so much as to say that I am strongly for a woman's right to choose. 100%. I don't even know how we can get to this point of discussing it. The state of Missouri seems to land on one side, and I'm going to the state legislature, and I'll do all that I can to try and protect a woman's rights to choose. So that's really fundamentally 100% of my view on this. I do have to add to that, though, that in addition to it being her right to choose, there's a strong economic impact that she has to go through in making this decision. And it's hard to not recognize the financial decisions that have to go into carrying a child, delivering a child, and yet, the next steps beyond that. So without the state recognizing those financial impacts, I think we've done a great disservice to men and women in our entire community.
I'm Jean, she, her pronouns. The day that it was actually overturned, I was devastated, even though I knew it was going to happen. That didn't play into how I felt. I was devastated. I called my sister immediately, early in the morning, as soon as it happened, and said, should I talk to your daughter, or are you going to? She's 16, right? This is important. She needs to know specifically what she needs, so that was really rough. And so we both talked to her. But yeah, it was a bad morning for all of us.
I'm Kate. The day it came down, I was a little surprised. I was hoping maybe the week meant something else. Honestly, I was really glad that I'm menopausal. And I really hoped that it would wake up more young people. I know some of them have been very active, but in my experience, I've been in a lot of movement activity that is a lot of older women and older people. And I was like, all right, here we are. Like, let's get moving.
Yeah. I'll give you an opportunity.
Okay, I'm Joe,
Skip you at the beginning.
and well, you didn't skip me. You just
I dove in.
dove in and decided to go first. I wasn't surprised by the decision at all. I was when the draft got leaked, just because of the highly unusual circumstances around the fact that it got leaked, but. Wasn't really surprised given the makeup of the court with what the substance of the decision was at all. I'll sort of echo Kate's comments here and say that, I'm someone who is, personally probably more insulated from the fallout of the overturn of Roe v. Wade than anybody I know for a variety of reasons. But I guess what I was sort of thinking about on the day that the unleaked, the official decision was announced, was that I don't know what's going to happen next for the country after this. I see the overturn of Roe v. Wade as possibly being the first move in really sort of a move toward, this separation of, we talk about there being red and blue America, and, with there being, this is way bigger than, pot laws, not that stuff's not important as well, but, in terms of just there being two different Americas where people live under very, very different legal and regulatory regimes, that it seems that we're possibly going into a period where that's going to become much, much more the case, and it's been increasingly becoming more and more the case for years anyway, that this more so than anything is going to be something that drives the country to become more and more separate in terms of just there being some states that will, enter into some sort of I'll just a confederation with each other, where there will be agreements for there to be some sort of reciprocity in terms of what sorts of agreements states enter into with each other to ensure that their respective residents have access to services, or states who will enter into some sort of an agreement with each other to share data about women's period tracking apps in order to prosecute them. That I see this as being a dangerous time for the United States coming up in terms of what sorts of social divisions and what sorts of just completely separate societies we're on the way towards setting up.
Yeah, definitely. I know that, well, the day it was leaked, I had the coronavirus, but, because truly, no rest for the wicked, right? But I know that I was a little surprised to actually have the leak documented, like you said, just kind of by the nature of the leak, but I know that I felt the day it was actually overturned officially, felt a little anticlimactic, right? I kind of thought people would be rioting or something, but of course Missouri, and this will go into actually what the state of access in Missouri looks like. Missouri was, of course, the first state to trigger law. Both our Attorney General and our Governor had pieces of that, which was passed back in 2019 as part of House Bill 126. We always like to talk about House Bill 126 in a framework that it was always meant to overturn Roe v. Wade. It was one of the first bills in the entire country that we called, or what included what we have now called cascading bans. These are gestational ages where if the 25-week ban was overturned by a court, there was a 16-week ban and an 8-week ban, and they were all pieces of this that were essentially made to kind of muddy the water and blur the lines until one was able to squeeze through the courts. Of course, Mississippi beat the very excited lawmakers here in Missouri, but that doesn't mean that they did not try. House Bill 126 also included penalties. This is something we've been trying to really communicate to people and are hoping folks will share. But right now in the state of Missouri, patients are not able to be criminalized for their pregnancy outcomes or abortions, right? All of the penalties fall on doctors. Doctors can face 10 years in prison. It is a Class D felony here in the state of Missouri to perform an abortion. Obviously, that means you also lose your medical license. It's very vague language. I know a lot of people saw right after the official ruling was actually implemented that there were some hospital systems in Kansas City and things that stopped providing emergency contraception. We like to be very clear, emergency contraception is just that, contraception. It does not stop or terminate a pregnancy, it prevents one. But we know that that damage was already done, right? When those patients at St. Luke's Hospital in Kansas City were unable to get the emergency contraception, the Plan B pill, or myriad of others, but Plan B, when they were unable to get that, that's what lawmakers wanted, right? The cruelty was the point, right? Like I said, abortion is now illegal here in Missouri, and there are efforts. I know that that's been up the top of everybody's mind as to how people are doing that. There is a very organized effort here in Missouri to have a constitutional amendment, just like they did in Kansas, to kind of bring some of these things back. But I will talk a little bit about Pro-Choice Missouri and who we are and why we're here and what our plans are. Does that sound okay to everybody?
Yeah.
And of course, I know this is a very casual setting. I'm a very casual person, so interject comments all the time. Pro-Choice Missouri was part of a 50-year organization called Pro-Choice America. We are the state affiliate, and we are actually, I think, technically 2 years older than our national, just of how things kind of shook out. We did end up getting what I call divorced from our national in 2020 during the pandemic, but we are still here and still fighting for Missourians' access to abortion and everything else. We are a leading grassroots pro-abortion or advocacy org, and I want to talk about that because people are a little jarred sometimes when we say pro-abortion. For 50 years, of course, people have been using a lot of euphemisms and lots of kind of muddy water around the issue of abortion, and that's what they want. The most startling statistic that I ever heard in this work was that anti-abortion activists use the word abortion 4 times more than people like myself and people like you all in this room. And they know why, right? That word is stigmatizing and uncomfortable, and people get kind of funny around it, right? But we know that abortion is normal. 1 in 4 women of reproductive age will have an abortion in their lifetime. Everybody loves somebody who's had an abortion. And so part of what our biggest messaging has been right now is that we need to say the word abortion, right? That's what we're talking about here. We are not talking about reproductive health and all of these other things. They're components of a person's life, right? Because we want to focus on everything so that everybody has the option to choose if and when they start or grow their families and all of the components to raise their healthy children and all of those things. We should all have that liberty. But when we talk about abortion, we want to be specific, right? Because that's what they're coming after. So I know that takes a while for people to kind of register with, but it's something that we have found incredibly important, especially as the current events have led. A lot of people are sharing their abortion stories for the first time. And you never know when you're in a room talking to people who hasn't had an abortion, right? We never want to be in a place where we're having a conversation and that person feels shame or stigma around what was an essential and time-sensitive medical decision for them. We always say, my coworker, who I wish could be here because she's wonderful, she always shares her abortion story, and she says that her abortion was an act of love, out of love for herself and her family and her peers. And it was paraphrasing, of course, I would never want to put words in her mouth, but that's how she views her abortion, right? And so we want to make sure that we are always upfront with those sorts of things. Pro-Choice Missouri does a whole bunch of things. Our longest and I think most infamous program is our clinic escort program. I'm joined by Barbara, my coworker. Barbara is our clinic escort Barbie at the St. Louis area clinics at Reproductive Health Services Planned Parenthood previously. Of course, our partners at Planned Parenthood unfortunately had to stop operating when the decision came down. But we still operate our clinic escort program at the Regional Logistics Center, which is the mega Planned Parenthood in Fairview Heights, as well as Hope Clinic for Women in Granite City. Those are our 2 closest abortion clinics. And really, since the decision has come down, perhaps because of a lack of services at RHS in the Central West End, or they've just really energized their base, those protesters are mean, and they are meaner, and there are more of them. And they're not just there on Saturdays, and they're there every single day now. And that impacts patients a lot, right? In Fairview Heights, they are very lucky that clinic has a fence that encapsulates the whole property, right? You have to enter the parking lot, you have to enter the fence. But in Granite City, that's not the case. It's on a public block, it's a city block, so the sidewalks are fair game. Granite City zoning they've refused allowing them to build a fence. So those protesters are right there next to you. And oftentimes, if their relatively small parking lot is full, you have to park publicly on the street, and they can come right up to you. There's nothing that stops them from actually shaking your hand if you felt like it. Of course, we know that those protesters are there specifically to turn people away. It's an intimidation factor. They're trying to scare them away. You'll see the buses, often from crisis pregnancy centers or fake clinics, offering things like STD, STI testing, pregnancy tests, things like that, free ultrasounds. And those are particularly insidious here in Missouri. Another component of House Bill 126 was a crisis pregnancy center, or as the state calls it, alternatives to abortion. tax credits. They used to get, I believe it was around $2 million. That amount of money has ballooned under House Bill 126. Of 114 of these crisis pregnancy centers, 74 of them receive taxpayer funding. And it is in multi-millions of dollars. There are matches that come through from the state where donors to these crisis pregnancy centers get something like an 8 times match on their charitable donations on their taxes. So it really incentivized giving these clinics, which have no medical personnel in them. They are not required to, by anything ever, to have any doctors, nurses, nothing. They are often religiously affiliated. There is a very notable anti-abortion activist, Abby Johnson, who at a convention said the quiet part out loud and said, if you are operating a crisis pregnancy center, the best patient that can walk through your doors is someone who thinks they're walking into an abortion clinic. They know that it looks the same. In fact, in the Central West End, we not only have reproductive health services at Planned Parenthood, but just a few blocks down on the same street, you have Thrive. Thrive is a crisis pregnancy center. They do receive taxpayer funding, and I believe in the case of Thrive, there are some actual medical services there, right? But again, they're still religiously affiliated, and they are there explicitly to trick people out of receiving abortion care. But our clinic escorts are really on the front lines of this. They are walking with our patients through those protesters, guiding them, letting them know that, you know, that sign, that van or whatever, that's not the clinic, that is not a part of Planned Parenthood or Hope Clinic. They can kind of say whatever they want, which is the scary part. They have the little sandwich board signs that say, you know, extra parking this way, or, you know, come in our van, and you know, or sometimes even Planned Parenthood is closed today, turn around.
Or we'll take you around the back.
Right, well, come around to the back door. Are you a clinic escort?
No, but I lived in a college town where we had a Planned Parenthood next to a fake clinic.
Of course.
And that was what they would do. Here, do you want to avoid the protesters? We'll take you around back.
Exactly. Right now, or well, previously, again, because RHS unfortunately no longer operates, I mean, Thrive's van was parked literally right there on Forest Park Avenue at the meter in front of the clinic. And I know in Illinois at Fairview Heights, again, they are lucky they have this big perimeter fence, but there's an office complex sort of right next to their parking lot. That's where they park their van, and they just watch, and they just wait, and oftentimes people will yell, they'll say all of these things. And again, these anti-abortion activists, they're energized by the fall of Roe v. Wade. They are getting pushier, more aggressive. There are more of them. They're there more times during the week. Oftentimes, our clinic escorts were only there on the weekends. Typically the protesters, the counter-protesters, I should say, were also only there on the weekends. Just, I guess they have jobs. But since the fall, we've seen them every day. And we are also expecting a more than 200% increase to our 2 Metro East clinics. Again, because of this sort of cascading effect, right? We saw a huge bump in patient load after Texas passed their abortion ban, and then Oklahoma, you know, and now something like 20 states have a banned abortion. And so patients are fleeing other states, and Illinois has really become an island of abortion access. I mean, full credit to Governor J.B. Pritzker, who has spent the last 6 or 8 months, I mean, really doing the work and repealing two-parent notification of abortion procedures for minors, and really doing some incredible work to make abortion as accessible in Illinois as it can be. Because the clinics, the politicians in Illinois, they know that it is an island, right? If you look at all of their neighboring states, Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, frankly, for the entire southeastern United States, the closest clinics are in southern Illinois, which is oftentimes hours and hours away. We're lucky in St. Louis that it's about 30 minutes from here, but if you're someone in Alabama or Mississippi or Florida, you're traveling hours, oftentimes even further, because southern Illinois is incredibly rural. So you also have to battle with appointment times because of this 200% increase in patient load to a few clinics, and clinics, we only had one in Missouri. Mississippi had one, but most states are not like that. Most states have multiple abortion clinics in them. And because of that, we're seeing wait times just increase exponentially. I got a phone call just last week about somebody who was in Northwest Missouri who's seeking abortion care, and they were trying to go to a clinic in Kansas, but the wait time was so long that it would prevent them from getting the medication abortion. So they were trying to come even further, to come to Illinois to see if they could get it any sooner. Luckily, that person was able to seek care in Illinois and was able to get it within the gestational age, and they were able to take the abortion pill, which is the far less invasive method of abortion, of terminating a pregnancy. But all of this confusion, all of this fracas is the point, right? We know that this was all sort of set up like this on purpose, and that they've been closing clinics and things like that for a long time.
How do people pay for
What was that?
How do you pay for one?
Oh,
Especially
so
if you're coming from out of state.
that's a great question.
It's not just like the cost of the procedure, it's the cost of like getting there and staying in a hotel or all the different things.
Yeah, it often depends on what your home state is and what your insurance status is. Even pre-House Bill 126, in Missouri, insurance providers were actually banned from covering abortion. So even if you have a good employer-provided health care, you could walk into Planned Parenthood, seek your abortion care, and if you, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, whatever, they are not allowed to cover your abortion here in Missouri. And it's been the way for quite some time, actually. Not all states are like that. There are many states where your typical health insurance will cover an abortion out of pocket without insurance, like in Missouri, or cases where you're uninsured. You're looking at between like $600 and $1,000 depending on again, your insurance status, whether that plays a part in it, as well as gestational age is the big one. The abortion pill is significantly less expensive than a surgical, what is called a D&E abortion. But yes, it does also include the travel, the lodging, the child care, the time off work, things like that. That was a big thing pre-ban here in Missouri, where we had a 72-hour waiting period. So that means that if I was seeking an abortion, I call our friends at Planned Parenthood and say, "Doc, I need an abortion." I have to come in for my consultation, see the same doctor. I'm going to say Dr. McNick, who's the chief medical officer. I have to come in and I have to see Dr. McNick. And then in 72 hours, I have to come back and I have to see Dr. McNick again. It has to be the same doctor within 72 hours of that. You have to have 72 hours to I guess, think about it or ponder your abortion. But again, we know that it's not so that you can ponder your abortion care. It is so that you have to travel out of state. If you're coming from Springfield or Columbia or Kansas City, you're traveling hours now. You have to stay in a hotel for 3 nights. You have to find childcare for 3 nights. You're taking off work for 3 more days or more because you don't know what the recovery time looks like, all of those things. Luckily, here in Missouri, we've got the Missouri Abortion Fund. They fund the procedure itself as well as some logistics. The Planned Parenthood, what is now being called the Regional Logistics Center, which is located at the Planned Parenthood Clinic in Fairview Heights, Illinois, also helps coordinate travel, lodging, childcare, hotel stays, all of those sorts of things. I know the last abortion that actually happened in Missouri was somebody who was driving through the middle of the night, the day before the decision came down to come and seek abortion care. Literally was 15 minutes before time right now.
Do you know how people access the recently passed St. Louis Abortion Fund? How do people access it?
So right now it's tied up in court. So unfortunately, nobody accesses Board Bill 61 right now. Hypothetically, this money is actually going to other organizations and other contractors, and so again, it has to make it through court. That will be quite the lengthy process. But hypothetically, that money, it's 1.75 million.
That sounds right.
It's 1 or 2, but at $1.75 million from St. Louis municipal budget. It's part of their ARPA funding that would go either to people like Planned Parenthood, the Missouri Abortion Fund. It typically goes to organizations and essentially, I don't think subcontractor is the technical word, but it goes to other people. The city's not actually writing a check or anything like that. But of course, Board Bill 61 was passed. Thank you, Alderman Ryan. You did vote yes on it, and we really appreciate that. It passed, I believe, by 1 vote at the Board of Aldermen. And it was actually the first city in the entire country to allocate some of their municipal funding for abortion logistics. Again, it never goes to the procedure itself, unfortunately, because of the Hyde Amendment, but it does go to travel, lodging, things like that, which is essential and oftentimes more expensive than the procedure itself, especially if you were able to get the medication abortion. Since St. Louis passed it a few weeks ago, Austin, Texas has done it, Portland has done it, Atlanta has done it, I believe there was another city in the Northeast that has done it. So we have really become a model for the entire country on what it looks like for blue cities living in red states that have to get their people out to get to their appointments. Literally within hours of the mayor signing that bill, the Attorney General has filed lawsuits. So it is all tied up, and all of that money, unfortunately, is also all tied up because of that. But
He
both
loses most of his lawsuits, so.
exactly. I believe the mayor tweeted this morning that he should cut the schmidt. But hypothetically, this is a really revolutionary way that cities and local governments can have some say on abortion access, right? Because typically, I mean, we hear that all the time, that cities and local governments have essentially nothing they can do. But that's not the case.
Where does telehealth fit into all this?
Telehealth can be tricky. It's really interesting because it depends on both your state of origin and the state that the physician is licensed in, and also that individual state's rules on telehealth. There was an interesting sort of blip in the pandemic where Illinois was able to provide abortion pills via the mail and via telehealth nationwide. It was a total accident. And unfortunately, a lot of states have cracked down on that, and it was, I believe, because of some FDA rule change on telehealth, specifically for pandemic protocol. Typically, your physician has to be licensed in the state that they are practicing in, and typically with telehealth, that would mean that if I'm a Missouri resident and the doctor is in Illinois, unless I'm physically in Illinois, that they can't do anything.
But if they're in Austria, they can.
Sometimes. Because then you also get into the issue of drug trafficking, which sounds really insane, but it's, of course, the abortion pill, mifepristone, misoprostol. It's a 2-pill regimen that is a prescription-only drug in the United States, and so like sending it through the mail without a prescription, crime. Even though there are places that you can get the abortion pill online, the WHO also does, again, for informational purposes only. The WHO does say that folks can self-manage their own abortion at home up to 12 weeks of pregnancy using mifepristone. It is a drug that has other uses. I believe it is an 8-pill regimen that can be inserted vaginally or taken orally over the course of several hours to self-induce an abortion. The thing we always have to say out there is that there is actually no way, if the pills are taken orally, for people to know if you were to have a miscarriage or if you self-induced your abortion. Do with that information as you will. That is not medical advice, and is for information and educational purposes only. But our clinic escort program, like I said, has been running for a very long time at our regional partners, and is really the flagship of our organization. Planned Parenthood has always, again, subcontracted is technically not the right word, but they've always subcontracted out their escort program, and they're our most dedicated volunteers. They're our best people. We, of course, also do a storytelling and a sex ed fellowship. That is where we train people to talk about their abortion stories, and we get into schools with local students and empower them to talk about sex education, what safe sex looks like, what reducing STI, STD transmission looks like, how to talk about abortion, right? Because we know that kids are going to be the next generation of voters. They're going to be the next generation of people who are making informed decisions on all of these things, but they're also at the precipice of their own sexual awakening and their own sex lives and things like that. And everybody should be able to have a healthy, well-rounded sex life, and that includes teenagers and people as they get older.
So when you do that sex ed, do you include consent?
Yes.
Because I think that's just what's missing from so much education is a deep understanding of consent.
Yeah, we talk about consent, we talk about STD, STIs, we talk about abortion care, we talk about what it looks like to be an advocate, really, for sex education in schools. Missouri state statute on sex education is pretty vague, and we like to keep it that way. Regrettably, it means that schools are not required. Most schools do not. I graduated high school in 2018. I went to Rockwood Summit in South St. Louis County. We had Thrive come and do our sex education, and they asked us in our gymnasium if we accepted Jesus Christ as our Savior. So, to say the least, I did not get sex education. But I did do TASH, Teen Advocates for Sexual Health, which is a great program at Planned Parenthood, and that's how I got started in this work. Our sex ed and our storytelling workshops are pretty new still to our organization, but I do have cards here if anybody is interested in that. Oftentimes our storytellers come with us in Jefferson City if they're comfortable. We've got a great group of probably a dozen people who have even spoken in their committee hearings and talked with senators directly about the time that they self-managed their own abortion or received abortion care themselves. We do a lot of, we've got a C3, a C4, and a PAC. Our C3 does a lot of research work. Our biggest report was the high cost of House Bill 126, which of course is the overwhelming abortion ban and the tax codes and all of those things that were wrapped into it. Often the omnibus pro-life bill is something you'll hear thrown around, but we know of course it's not pro-life. That report shows that both, particularly the city of St. Louis, but Missouri as a whole, loses out on quite a lot of money when companies don't want to come here, they don't host their conventions here. I believe it is $700,000 that the city of St. Louis misses out on per convention that has chosen not to. It's not to come to St. Louis, and it's chosen other Midwestern cities where abortion access was at the time more accessible, although now of course we know that in the Midwest abortion is incredibly hard to come by. As I was saying, abortion is totally illegal here in the state of Missouri, but we have a plan for that. Carolyn was very reassuring that we were planning for it. We had a plan for it. And I feel like we could never actually be ready, but we've been trying. Right now, I wish I had the postcard with me, but we are all out. We are all out of everything, which is thanks to the generosity of ward meetings and all of those things that we've been invited to. But we've got a plan. We have currently 9 staff, which is the most our organization has ever had in its 50-something year history. Currently, we're based in the Grove, but we are looking to expand. We are looking to build a new headquarters here in St. Louis that we are calling the Center for Reproductive Equity. It will be a new building that hopefully we can not only house Pro-Choice Missouri in, but some of our closest partners, like the Missouri Abortion Fund. The Missouri Abortion Fund has existed for a long time. They used to be called the Gateway Women's Access Fund, but they have rebranded in the last couple of years. They've never been able to have a physical office here in St. Louis, and so we're hoping that we can provide a space for them at reduced cost in sort of that building. And it can be a real hub for activists and people doing the work for the whole region, right? Because we don't do this work in a vacuum. It is not just us. Another one of our partners we hope will join us is MoHo Justice. They are formerly a sort of piece of ACLU. They represent the interests and safety of sex workers because, of course, we at Pro-Choice Missouri believe that sex work is work, and those people are disproportionately impacted by bans on abortion and things like that. And those people are doing incredible work, but again, as a small startup organization, they haven't had rooms like this. You know, this building is a great example where ward organizations and other people, I think I did an IFCLA training here one time. This space has become a place where people from many issues and advocacy orgs can come and hang out and do their thing, and we're hoping that our building in St. Louis can also be a part of that.
Well, what does MoHo Justice stand for?
MoHo Justice. It is
Okay,
the-
not an
yeah.
acronym.
Not an acronym. They are self-described folks.
Thank you.
I totally lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. But they are, yeah.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So you said earlier that in Missouri, patients themselves can't be prosecuted.
Correct.
But we're watching that happen in Nebraska, where the 60-year-old girl and her mom are getting prosecuted.
Yes, that is
Scary
happening.
as hell. Like, is there an effort to have that, you know, escalate to other states, or
Yes.
what can you say to that?
Yes, the Right to Life has a very terrifying website. If you ever feel like doom scrolling through righttolife.org, they post their legislative priorities just like we do, and they are pretty grim. They are really trying to hit hard on survivors of sexual assault and violence. They've published on their website specifically that they're going to be talking about abortion access in the context of rape and incest. They know that they are going to be coming for what we call cross-state bans, those things that prevent patients from leaving Missouri and going to Illinois. Representative Mary Elizabeth Coleman of Arnold has already pledged that she will introduce that bill. Last session, she already introduced a Texas SB 8 copycat, which had the private right of action, that civil lawsuit, not a criminal lawsuit, which makes it different from a lot of other laws, right? Like in Missouri, if you're a doctor and you are found guilty, you are charged in court criminally. However, under Texas's SB 8, that is a civil trial, and you are fined by citizen to citizen through the legal process. And so we know that that's definitely going to be coming next session. It really, in all those other states, the statute is either incredibly vague or sort of unknown, right, unchallenged in court because of the supremacy clause, right, of abortion was legalized nationwide. They were unable to sort of start those mechanisms, so nothing has actually been tried in court. So it's unfortunately a free-for-all in which who challenges these laws, depending, again, in those individual cases, right? A patient in Ohio who traveled to Indiana could potentially be sued by Indiana or Ohio. There's a patient in Nebraska. It's totally up to state and sometimes individual prosecutors.
One of the things that I can't figure out is how I have standing if Francine, my good buddy, decides to have an abortion. I could sue her for $10,000. You're supposed to have a legal standing in order to sue someone. That in itself feels unconstitutional to me.
I agree. I'm unfortunately not a constitutional lawyer, but
But it's always been the case that you have to have standing.
So
You know?
You do have standing, it's the legislation itself that creates that standing.
yeah.
So the state
But I have no
legislature says-
interest, no.
Well, the state is saying that you do.
And I'm assuming that this is all going to go to the Supreme Court eventually, because like New York is now trying to craft, gun legislation with the same kind of idea. Like, okay, well, you're going to play this game, we can play it too. But yeah, it's going to have to, I think, go to the Supreme Court, and they're going to have to decide whether Americans can just sue the shit out of each other for anything, which is going to be a nightmare.
Yes.
And they're on our side, right, the Supreme Court?
I've always said that. They've got our backs.
I actually used to believe that, but I was naive.
That can be true.
Yeah, for a bit.
I did.
Yeah, what's up?
So, I'm just thinking about the landscape here in Missouri, and, in Kansas, they recently had a vote to enshrine abortion rights in their constitution, and I've seen a little bit of scuttlebutt, for lack of a better term, but nothing really official, that there's maybe an effort, and the one name that I've heard in connection with this is Crystal Quaid down in Springfield. She's a state rep for, I don't know what the district number is down there, but it was
Minority leader
but she's also the minority leader. That's right.
for the Senate.
But she's the one name that I've heard in connection with the possibility that some sort of an effort to codify abortion rights in the Constitution here in Missouri might be in the works as well. And I'm wondering whether anyone else here has more information about that than the, random posts I've seen on Twitter over the past couple of days from random people that I don't know.
Yeah, so I can answer that. There is a concerted effort to do that. That sort of process, hypothetically, of course, right now is looking like, I guess I'll explain the sort of IP, the initiative petition process, sort of broadly. Right now is when people would begin drafting ballot language. So that's the little blurb that you see directly on your ballot, but that's also what it actually does, right? The several pages of legal documents that amend certain state statutes or the state constitution or whatever the individual case may be. Then it has to go through a legal process to get approval. It has to essentially get checked out and vetted by the state to make sure that, yes, it does what you think it does. The ballot leading is, I believe the word they use often is like misleading. It is not misleading. That's always typically kind of a big fight, is what the word on your ballot actually looks like. Yeah, I know Carolyn knows this because she helped me notarize too many petitions that we dropped off just upstairs back in 2000.
500.
Huh?
North of 500.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was quite a lot of pages on that. But to make sure that that blurb, falls within legal parameters, I think that went to the Supreme Court that year, and they were really cutting close to the actual election because of some sort of legal hangups. But once that is hypothetically approved, and your hypothetical government officials do their jobs in a timely manner, because of course we know that in 2019, after House Bill 126 happened, our Attorney General dragged his feet and did not let people have a say on the abortion referendum. Here in Missouri, people are supposed to have a say on legislation, but he ran out the clock and we were unable to actually do it back in 2019. The Missouri Supreme Court did find him in violation of state statute, but regrettably, the damage was done. Then it has to go to signature collection. There's a quota per congressional district. We've got 8 in the state of Missouri. You have to have, I believe it's 200,000 per congressional district. Or
No, for the state.
Total.
So it's a
But it's gotta-
percentage of total voters.
yes,
But
But-
from 6 of the 8.
but it's gotta-
6 of the 8 congressional. Yeah, they're allocated by geographic region. It's-
6 now? Okay.
6 out of 8, I
Yeah.
believe, yeah.
Yes.
So,
It's
it-
always changing. Yeah.
So, what sort of language is under consideration to be included in that? So, for instance, I'm thinking about like protections for people coming from out of state, for instance. Like, how much of a conversation is there about like how much do my advocates want to put into this amendment versus, you know, how simple might we want to keep it so that folks might not be as easily misled by the opposition about what is and what isn't in it. Because, you know, I think about, you know, things like we've talked about, for instance, the challenges of folks coming in from out of state, or privacy protections in terms of what kinds of information about patients, physicians would be protected from being required to turn over to law enforcement if asked. So what's the conversation right now about, like, how much of that stuff might find its way into the constitutional amendment that is currently being hammered out in terms of what the language of it might be?
Yeah, right now we're still in the very early stages of drafting that bill text, of course, or I'm sorry, ballot language. But essentially all of those things are on the table, right? Missouri has a slew of what are called TRAP laws. Those are chartered regulations of abortion providers. Those are things like how wide the hallways need to be, how big the janitor's closets need to be, requiring doctors to have admitting privileges to local hospitals, all of those sorts of things. Of course, there's potential room for amendments to tax code, right? For like our alternatives to abortion or crisis pregnancy center tax credits. Missouri also, the state government actually runs a program that is alternatives to abortion, and so that is actually directly administered by the state. So all of those things are on the table, and right now it's sort of like in lawyers' hands as to what can be amended constitutionally at the ballot. There are also certain parameters that are set by the state as to how wide and how sweeping an individual ballot initiative can be.
It's got to be a single issue.
Essentially, right. How would they have to break that up, right? Would it be one ballot initiative to remove TRAP laws and repeal House Bill 126, and one to protect doctors, and one to change the tax code, or can we put those all together? It's just up in the air. And unfortunately, we probably won't have answers for quite a few months because, of course, the lawyers go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. And we actually, I mean, in between the day Roe was leaked and the official ruling came down, like even reporters were calling us at Pro-Choice Missouri, still doing like research on the crisis pregnancy center tax credits to try and track down actual amounts. Like even after years of it having been implemented, there was still information that had to be sunshined from the state because people just didn't have answers.
There's also, people also test those ballot language out before they bring it to the lawyers even, because
Yep.
they want to know that people in rural areas and in cities and everywhere in between are going to, you know, feel like it's acceptable language. So it's like a big process before it gets to even the petition, you know, that I stand in front of places.
I worked on drafting the medical marijuana initiative petition prior to that, and I can tell you it's a pretty arduous process because, like Gene mentioned, you want to test out the different language with various demographics, and then, I mean, you've never seen 4 or 5 guys that agree very much on what needs to happen, argue so much about words, and 4 or 5 lawyers in a room trying to figure out a constitutional amendment. It's really, really difficult stuff. And there's just not a whole lot of expertise in it because not every day that any lawyer goes, I'm going to try and change the Constitution.
Right.
So it's arduous process.
I know this is such a disturbing time in a lot of ways, but I'm actually kind of hopeful because I feel like people were ignoring so much stuff and thinking like, oh, it's still legal, even though there was one clinic in all of Missouri that was still operating. And so now it's kind of much, people are awake about it again, I'm hoping, and then maybe we can eventually come to better laws rather than this sort of death by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly. And that's been a big talking point for us at Pro-Choice Missouri as well, is that even a year ago, abortion wasn't really accessible in Missouri, right? People were having to travel hours to the nearest clinic. We had 72-hour waiting periods. Doctors had to have admitting privileges for folks who don't work in medicine. That is quite the process, right? They don't just give that to anybody, especially because in St. Louis, a lot of our hospitals are religiously affiliated. Folks like SLU, SSM, they will not give abortion providers admitting privileges, right? Explicitly. And so that is often a barrier in itself. We always like to say that Roe was the floor, never the ceiling, and hopefully, like you all are saying, that we can actually come through with actual access, and what that looks like is people actually being able to make these choices, actually having insurance coverage, actually being able to get the abortion the day they make their appointment, because they have made up their minds already, right? We trust people to make decisions about their own bodies. I know that's crazy these days, but that's what we at Pro-Choice Missouri believe. We also know that there were a slew of, we kind of refer to them as broadly just exceptions, but there's quite a lot of things that get kind of turned into that, exceptions for rape, exceptions for incest, exceptions for life of the mother. Technically, we do have an exception for life of the mother here in Missouri, but again, there was more confusion as to what is life-threatening versus what is life-altering, and those words that Alderman Ryan said, like, people will argue about them, and especially in an environment where doctors are worried about losing their medical license and going to jail, they're going to sit there for quite a long time and ponder that, because they really don't like losing their licenses.
Do we have numbers yet on how many doctors have left Missouri?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I know,
I hear all the
anecdotally-
stories, but I just,
Right.
yeah, there's no numbers yet. Brian, do you know any recent polling on pro-choice stance or, before Roe fell, sort of in favor? I haven't seen any recently. But I'm just wondering, as we are talking about potentially taking this to the ballot,
Right.
last numbers I saw, this should pass easily, even in a state like Missouri. Because I think people forget that, having a pro-choice stance, even a pro-abortion stance, doesn't mean that that's the decision you would personally make for yourself or your family. That truly only means free from government interference. And that is super popular, even in a very red state like Missouri. So, I just want to make sure we all remember that, because it is insanely personal. And it's nobody's business but your own. But it gets lost in all of this. But yeah, I want to say it was 68 or something last
It
time.
was 68% of Missourians opposed government interference in their health care.
Yeah.
That was the wording of the polling at the time. I believe that was now, my sense of time is broken, but I believe that was probably a year or 18 months ago. We, to my knowledge, have not received any new polling, of course, post-Roe, but we saw Kansas as an incredibly encouraging sign. It was 70% almost of Kansans opposed it. And we've got actually 4 more ballot initiatives in Michigan, Vermont, Kentucky, and one other state will have abortion access on the ballot explicitly through constitutional amendments or state statute amendments via the ballot.
Is it Michigan?
Michigan, Vermont, Kentucky, and I believe one more.
Are those all vote no ballots? Because Kansas was a no ballot.
It is a mix. I have my sticky note is stuck to my laptop, so I don't have it.
No worries.
It is a mix. It is a mixed bag. 3 of them are defense, which is, or I'm sorry, 3 of them are offense, which are sort of saying abortion is illegal right now, or our state statute is unclear / hostile towards reproductive rights, and we are going to change that. One of them is defense, where it's like Kansas, where it's a no vote, where they're trying to actively change it, and citizens are essentially stopping that, preventing that.
Because the no vote's easier. In
Yes.
terms of the logistics for getting reproductive rights. It's much easier to get the vote no than it is to vote.
Yeah. Have
the,
we-
the state constitution already codifies it, and how that was the case in Kansas, I have no clue, but it's a lot easier to say, yes, we want to stay.
Right. And Kansas was unique too because it was an interesting case where their state Supreme Court had essentially said that the legislature did not have jurisdiction, and then the lawmakers put giving themselves the jurisdiction on the ballot. It was very convoluted and difficult, and people were quite worried about it. People were really unsure if that language could be appropriately conveyed to voters, but 70% of them said yes. Said no to abortion bans, I mean.
Well, and there was a whole program of deception.
Right.
To try to convince people, we'll bring you around the back, basically.
Yep.
But I think what we forget is that, okay, so, you have a large population of independents. This is not just a Republican or Democrat issue. And the independents are largely young people. And they will sweat. They can. But they've got to get registered. They've got to be registered to vote.
Well, I know, speaking anecdotally, I know a lot of folks that 6 months ago would have identified as pro-life, who now, if you were to put the vote in front of them, would say, no, I'm not with the pro-choice folks on this one. I'm never going to have an abortion. But the fact that the Supreme Court took it right away from me is unconscionable.
Well, and what you're getting at, the far-reaching consequences of those with fertility issues, the fact that, like, can you keep frozen embryos?
Right.
Legally, like, can you do that? It's so much bigger than just terminating or not. It's the whole sort of breadth of reproductive.
Well, and they know it's even bigger than women too, right? Like it goes far beyond just about birth or abortion as well, right? And privacy rights and all sorts of things beyond that that we haven't even started to figure out in this country, but it will come down. We will have to figure them out.
Right. If I was trying to have a baby, I would not be in the church. I would not be in one of these states because, if something goes wrong, they would let me die, essentially. That is terrifying.
I have
Or
good friends
prosecute.
that think about moving right now.
Right.
Because right before the ban went through, they went through that. It was a terrible process to get the pills and everything, because after a miscarriage, but they're still trying to get pregnant. So they're Dogtown's gonna lose my friend. Because precisely that, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you can say, well, it's just across the river, but if you have an emergency, a medical emergency,
Or it becomes illegal to cross that river.
right.
Right.
Well, in Indiana, it straight up prosecuted people where it's fuzzy, whether they were trying to self-manage an abortion or miscarried. Purdy Patel is a woman in Indiana who, she actually went to jail in Michigan.
She's still in jail.
Yes, she's still in jail, yes. So
I believe she was sentenced to 20 years. She is still in jail.
that's something that should scare everybody who wants to get pregnant and have a bunch of babies.
Right.
That's terrifying. Or somebody who maybe isn't planning to get pregnant, but has the ability to. Maybe their contraceptives fail. They have to. I don't care how organized you are. It's not. Nothing is under control. But
Not
even
even
people
vasectomies.
who want to be pregnant, if something goes wrong, that you could be thrown in jail. It's just- That actually, getting back to what we were talking about with Clinic Escort Barbie, having been a Clinic Escort and stood in that parking lot, one of the hardest things to watch is when these anti-abortion protesters come after someone trying to go access care, and their situation, and I know this because they tell us, it was a very wanted pregnancy. They didn't ever want to be there. They didn't ever want to have to go in that building. It's not their plan. Something has gone terribly wrong. But those anti-abortion protesters don't differentiate between any of the millions of reasons somebody might be walking in that building. And I've seen them use, if you have your name on a t-shirt or a school name or a sports name or a cross hanging from your rear view mirror, those anti-abortion folks will use all of those things to try to pressure these people and make them feel horrible about their decision. And that's the hardest thing, I think, to witness as somebody who just happens to be there. That's like, it's not me trying to go in that building, but it's like, I don't know, but going after somebody on a personal level like that, I just,
It's hard, and she's right. I don't
You've been out there,
escort
yeah.
regularly, but I go out there and I'm always at the clinics, and you hear racialized epithets used, all kinds of horrible things, that anything they can pick out, bumper stickers, license plate numbers, anything.
or something they can see, like the race you happen to be. And
Mhm.
it's,
That's the really
you know,
hard one for
you
me.
get these really racially charged statements about, especially not only toward the pregnant person in this case, but oftentimes their partner or their, the person that happens to be with them.
Exactly.
So it's just insanely personal. I mean, these are the same people that have their license plates written down and have photographs taken of themselves
Yeah.
and video. And it's just the invasion of privacy. It's like, what's scariest about all of this is, and we saw this in 2016, because I was still escorting at that point, everything ramped up when Trump was first elected, because these folks felt empowered and emboldened. And I fear, and all these years since then, that like it's just getting more and more amped up. And Roe falling, I think, is like a whole new level of that, because some of these folks that have been fighting this fight, and I mean, in their defense, they absolutely believe they're on the right. They passionately believe what they believe.
Yes.
And I don't know, it's just kind of scary, all the boundaries that these people are willing to cross for patients. And, I don't know, in these conversations, because it comes up with candidates, and people are talking about abortion more than I ever remember them talking about it. These are the things I talk about with people who maybe aren't comfortable with the idea yet. Maybe they are still pro-life. But you start talking about the realities of all these far-reaching things. It's what you were talking about earlier, sort of this broad conversation where you do have to just, not avoid the war, be upfront about it. Like, this is what we're talking about. But at the same time, it's not just this one stereotypical person who's always someone walking into that clinic. And I think that's really important to remember as we're talking to people.
Yeah, I grew up in a Catholic household. My grandmother hates that I work at Procures, Missouri. And that's fine. I went to a Catholic university. I went to SLU. But, of course, we know that Catholic women get abortions at the same rate all other women get abortions. So,
Right.
You went to a Jesuit.
I went,
I was in law school there.
What is your organization's sort of plan? Is it mostly at this point to work on ballot initiatives, or what is it?
yeah, I was kind of talking about that before we got kind of
Yeah.
on a tangent. But that's okay. That's what I love. I love having these flowy, more personal conversations with people. As I was saying a little bit earlier, we are trying to build our new headquarters here in St. Louis. We have the most staff that we've ever had, which is phenomenal. We were able to have some huge legislative wins and some electoral wins. Of course, Board Bill 61 is fresh in everybody's mind. That was an incredible victory for our advocates. We were able to re-elect Congresswoman Cori Bush. We had a number of candidates across the state win their primaries this month, just a few weeks ago. And so we are trying to now expand really outstate. We know that by 2024, we are hoping to raise an additional $1 million. There's a $1 million plan to expand statewide to hire more organizers in Kansas City, in Columbia, in Springfield, so that we can win more seats and elect pro-abortion candidates across the state. We are also, of course, not naive that we are not going to flip. I think we need something like 15 more seats to break the supermajority, and then an additional, I think it would take us 43 additional seats on top of where we are to break the majority. That's not happening tomorrow. That is not going to happen in November, probably not going to happen in 2024. But that is why we are building infrastructure in Kansas City and Columbia and Springfield. Last weekend I was in Columbia. The weekend before that, I was in Kansas City and then Columbia. I will be in Pittsburgh this weekend, and then I will do another lap through the state through Cape, Springfield, and then ending in Kansas City again. We know that we have to reach those people, and an admitted weak spot of our organization has always been that we are based in St. Louis, and we have our staff in St. Louis, and as much as we all love you all here in St. Louis, and I grew up here in St. Louis, there are 5 million other people who live in this state whose rights and choices are decided in Jefferson City. That brings me to my favorite ask, which is our gala. Our gala is the pro-abortion event of the year to be at. It is always a party. Carolyn has always been there for as long as I can remember and has been a wonderful volunteer for us. This year is at the Marriott in downtown St. Louis on September 23rd. I've got save the dates if anybody is interested in it.
It's on my fridge.
Thank you. I'm excited to see you next month. It's always a blast, and of course it is our biggest fundraiser of the year, which allows us to do all of this work. We are also looking forward to working with our partners, and I'm actually, this is a perfect segue because I'm going to start passing these around the table. These are Plan C pills, and also, they're not the pills. These are Plan C pills as well as Right by You. Right by You is a wonderful service that is run by a woman in Metro East. That is an encrypted, totally private text hotline. It is aimed towards teenagers, but it is welcome for anybody, where they can text and with the questions about how they get abortion, how can it be paid for, do I need parental notification, sort of all of these logistics that people are really confused about. So take as many stickers as you like. I even have more in my basket. Put them on bathroom stalls. Put them wherever you think people may be. Plan C pills, of course, Plan B pill is the contraceptive pill. That does not terminate a pregnancy, it stops it. Plan C pill is, of course, the abortion pill. And there are, again, for informational purposes only, ways that people can obtain those pills, and Plan C is one of those methods. I also have some of these postcards that I will also pass around. This is for, right. It is for the right time, which is an initiative of the Missouri Family Health Council. It is part of the state's Title X program, which is administered by the federal government for low and no cost birth control. They have more than 70 clinics around the state where they offer it. It is free or low cost, and the Right Time also offers all 13 FDA-approved methods of birth control, which, if folks have not tried to actually obtain contraceptive methods, some of them can be incredibly hard. And so it's a rarity that this organization and these people are able to provide all 13 methods to their patients. That has been our big focus in the immediate future, has been the patient confusion, right? Because abortion is time sensitive, and so we had to make sure that people had the resources and the information that they needed in the immediate future. But I'm really excited now to pivot towards November and working on some of our electoral goals. We have some canvases for pro-abortion candidates in the St. Louis area. We will also be going to Kansas City for a day of action. All of that will be on our social media. We are at prochoice_Mo on Facebook on Instagram and Twitter, and our Facebook page is facebook.com/prochoice_Mo, M-O. You can find all of those
Highly
things.
recommend canvassing with them. It's a lot of fun, good group, great support system when your knee goes out and Tyler Road's out because of the stairs. Good people.
We're good people. We try to take care of our canvassers, right? Because that's hard. It's hard and intimidating to especially when you're talking about things like abortion access. That's intimidating, right? It can be hard to knock on a stranger's door and gear up for a conversation about access to abortion. But thank you for joining us. Our folks there are always there to help you feel empowered so that you can have those conversations and sort of redirect some of that energy into their candidates, right? Because we know that candidates who fight for access to abortion are probably also fighting for some other great things.
So what about texting and postcards?
What about what?
Text banking and postcards.
We do text banking as well. We also do phone banking, which is totally remote. We have not really rolled out a lot of postcards. We did some for the primary, but not in any real volume. But our text banking is wonderful. It's this new program that I'm very excited about. We've been texting for a long time, and I'm being a total campaign nerd about it now, because this program, good. Typically, you have to copy and paste your text and then click send. This new program, I don't know if it's a glitch, but you can just hold down the enter button, and it will send it and copy and paste your text. And so sometimes if you're feeling really bad, I just put my phone on the key and walk away, and it will send 200 text messages.
I really like the idea of text messages because so many people, so you're young, you probably get this, but I never answer the phone unless I know who it is.
Same.
So you're not going to be able to phone bank me for anything, ever. And I don't understand why any sane person, now that there's caller ID, would ever answer their phone. So if they answer the phone, they're crazy to begin with. This is my prejudice, I get it. But they don't watch TV, they're not going to see ads, they're not reading newspapers, you know, but they do text, they see text.
Yeah.
And I feel like if it was a conversation, like a deep canvassing, I don't know what strategy you're using, I'll text bank for you.
Wonderful. I will make sure to get you connected. I wish I had, these are, I reached for cards, but they're not actually my business cards. These are clinic escort cards to get more information on our clinic escort program, if anybody would like those. I do have those cards. Don't have my business cards.
I can sit at a computer for you.
We can text bank, we'll get you plugged in a bunch of ways. That's a great question about deep canvassing. We are doing both electoral canvassing in a coordinated manner with our PAC, as well as an independent expenditure basis with our C4. So there are sort of multiple avenues. There are also going to be paid canvassers if folks are interested in that, or know people in their lives who would be interested. I believe our going rate right now is $17 an hour. So it's a great way you can change the world and make some cash over the summer. It's a super flexible schedule too, typically evenings and weekends.
That's a physical knocking on the.
It is. It is.
That's out for me.
I understand. What else do we have? We also have our deep canvas, which is also physical canvassing again, but those are where people are having like 30-minute or more conversations, where we really try and talk with people who don't always agree with us, and we're moving the needle, we're talking to them about, like Carolyn said, the far-reaching impacts of these things, and even having some of like our storytellers and people who have had abortions talking about what that means to them and what that choice meant to them. So we've got plenty of ways to get people plugged in every weekend starting. Our office is closed next week because I'll be in Pittsburgh for part of it, and the rest of the team will actually be attending another conference in Dallas. But after next week, starting on Monday the 29th, we will have canvases every weekend, Saturday and Sunday, going up to the election. And we actually, another great piece of evidence this year, we have had more requests for our endorsement than any other year.
Yeah.
We had more than 100 people submit their surveys from literally every corner of the state. We made endorsements of Jess Piper in House District 1 up at the Iowa-Nebraska border, all the way to Cape Girardeau, to Branson, to Springfield, to St. Louis, Kansas City, Columbia. I mean, really, truly, we have candidates in every single corner of the state who are
What about
running.
Trudy?
Huh?
I heard from Trudy.
We endorsed both Lucas Spencer-Toder and Trudy Bush Valentine in the primary, and of course now she is carrying on our endorsement to the general.
Good. Very good. We have to get her. I mean, you know, we have to vote for her. Just gotta let you know.
I love your gusto.
We have to get them in there. Support Trudy.
I don't know, again, like the mayor said, it's time to cut the Schmidt.
Yeah, definitely. Good.
So Eric Schmidt is letting rural hospitals close.
Yes.
And steal the money from the workers and leaving people without any access to health care. High-risk pregnancies have to come all the way to St. Louis in many cases because there are no services for high-risk pregnancies in most of Missouri. If they really cared about those babies, they would at least keep the hospitals open. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Missouri is also, on top of just pregnancy-related care, just general obstetric gynecological care in Missouri is a real challenge. I mean,
Psychiatric care, emergency care, care for chronic diseases, you name it. If the hospital is closed and you have to drive 2 hours to St. Louis with high gas prices, take time off from your minimum wage job to get up here, how do you get health care for anything?
right.
You have a baby who is born with medical challenges, there is no health care for that baby with challenges in most of Missouri.
You are so right, Nancy. I'm afraid that we're gonna have to move on though, so is
Yeah,
there
I
any
know.
like last
Sorry.
minute, like, You want to make sure that you got in, or did you get everything?
I think I've got everything in. I will leave some of these things behind me because, like Jean said, I have a 6 a.m. flight tomorrow. So I am going to let folks do their updates after myself while I go pack for that, because why would I pack ahead of time? But does anybody else have any questions or resources that I can direct them towards? Anything?
I think you did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you for spending your evening with me.
I would love to take your see.
What was that?
I'd love to see your galloping and your.
Oh, of course.
Sign up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Absolutely.
That's what we're hoping for.
Thank you so much, friends, for having me.
I record Brent.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, we're live streaming. So.
I know, but my people, anybody I know isn't on that.
But you have to share it.
That's the idea, so we have,
Yeah.
we are,
Yeah.
we'll live with activists 24
Yeah.
whatever we are.
All right. Well, Brett, Carolyn, do you have updates?
No, been on
Yeah, you're on break.
so,
Yeah, you're on break. Any special projects you're working on in the meantime, or are you like actually on break?
So I'm working on drafting a bill that is going to address lead remediation throughout the city. We know that in the city of St. Louis, kids here have greatly elevated exposure to lead as compared to cities and kids in other similarly situated cities. Long story short, lead poisoning makes you violent and stupid, and we don't need more violent and stupid people in St. Louis. So I think right now we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with the federal dollars coming in, federal infrastructure dollars to really readdress the way that we look at lead remediation. I'm modeling the bill off of the asbestos bill that I did some time back, which just completely changed the way that we deal with asbestos remediation in the city. The goal is not just to prevent lead in our drinking water, but also to reduce the amount of environmental lead that's present. We have huge swaths of the city that we're doing a lot of demolitions on, and we're going to be seeing more and more of that, especially as MGA comes in and gets a foothold in, and we start to see new development there. We're going to see a lot of big old buildings get demoed, and just the same as asbestos, when you run a wrecking ball through an old building, that lead gets into the air, gets into the ground. The little girl playing on the playground 20 years from now gets exposed to lead. And so it's preventable. We have the money right now to actually start to do something about this. There is better practices than what we're using right now, and I do anticipate that it'll be controversial because nothing in St. Louis isn't controversial. But to me, it's a no-brainer. And
Is there like a lead lobby? What?
so really, where the rubber hits the road with it,
Yes, that question.
where the rubber hits the road with it is the people who have the training to deal with asbestos and with lead remediation and stuff typically work at bigger companies, and so there's a push-pull between smaller, typically minority-owned contractors and then bigger construction companies. And so you start to see that, well, you're pushing me out of these projects, and my response is, these are projects that are outside of the scope of what you can handle anyway. You're not demoing skyscrapers, we're not talking about single-family houses here. And if your company grows to such a size that you are demoing things bigger than like a 4-family home, I think it's time that you have to get with best practices for the environment, for the people around you. I don't think that anyone should be able to skate by saying, oh no, I'm just a mom and pop shop doing giant demolitions, so I shouldn't have to follow the same rules as big guys.
Okay, thanks.
Is there anything about testing soil? Like, there's a lot of community gardens, sustainable backyard gardens, and if there's lead in the soil or other heavy metals in the soil, if you grow it in your own yard, you're creating, unhealthy food when you think you're doing organic food.
And I can tell you that throughout most of the city, you'd be unhappy if you took a soil.
Yeah, so Nancy, Extension Services offers free lead testing for backyard gardeners, community garden, backyard garden. The Extension Services, University of Missouri Extension offices, and so you can send them away for free to them, and they will send them back. They'll give you an envelope even, and they will send them back with the results, and 99%, well, I don't know, that's high. Almost every time, there's gonna be lead in there. So that's why, for instance, at Gateway Greening, when I worked there a million years ago now, we always built raised beds, just always, because it was like, there's almost always gonna be lead. And then we also tried to put as many raspberry bushes as possible, because they actually leach those heavy metals and hold it in their stems, and so none of the edible portions get it, so you can still eat from it. Same with mustard greens, things like that. So, yeah. So anyway, there's a lot of resources in community garden organizations for that kind of thing. We actually did work with the state to try to get some laws passed back in, when was I there, 2006 or something like that? 2008, I don't know. Anyway, it did not work out. There was there were people arguing about things that didn't seem to matter to us because we were really concerned about people's health.
Yeah.
On my particular piece of legislation, I have been working with Senator Beck at the state level to try and get kind of mirrored language throughout the state. He seems to think there's a path through the Senate at least. I have no idea what the House does. That's going to be Dell's it's a new problem. Congratulations, by the way. But I have no idea what its prospects are in the House, but Doug seems to, Senator Beck seems to think there's a path through the Senate.
That would be great.
And so if we can get something at least in the Senate working, and then also locally, hopefully we can have kind of a statewide push on it.
The one thing that was helpful is that you can actually get designated brownfield, and so that means contaminated with heavy metals. Your soil is contaminated with heavy metals. So you can actually get that designation, which then helps you to get federal funding if you're a big enough organization to do that cleanup. The state was not involved in any of that, but anyway.
So like
Schoolyards, big buildings, corporate buildings, when they demolish buildings, they're big enough, they have to follow federal guidelines on that. State, I don't know.
And people want those brownfield credits because
Yeah.
they're massive credits.
Yeah.
So there's a real incentive to use the incentive. But yeah, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
I would bring someone.
First off, just thank you. I really care about the lead issue, which I talked to you before, but like, I'll do any, you ever need help, like, hit us up, I will do anything you need.
For sure.
Is there any effort to try to get external funding outside of the city? The best case example for this is, for me, is New York, New Jersey. They replaced all their lead service lines in one push with a bunch of money from a foundation. I don't think it's allowed to also have it who, but is there any way to
In the infrastructure bill, the federal infrastructure bill that passed, there's a huge portion of money that was set aside for lead remediation in cities like this.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was talking with Senator Beck about, is just exactly, because he's a pipe fitter by trade, so he knows much more about this stuff than I do, frankly. But to try and extrapolate how much work we can get done for the amount of money that's been set aside for the state of Missouri, because the things that I don't know about bidding out construction jobs could build skyscrapers, but he seems to think that there's a path to really take care of a good chunk of the lead over a period of time, mostly through the demolitions and then retrofitting existing long-standing buildings, which we have done to some extent with our schools, especially schools that we use. I think school board member,
Sonny.
Sonny. She was here a couple weeks back.
Yeah.
Talking about some of that. But I think that, yeah, long story short, yes, there is a desire to see additional funds coming. The city can't do it.
Okay, cool. That's good to hear. And then my next one sort of involves you too. Currently, state law is that Missouri Sewer Department, or whatever they're called, only has to replace stuff that they randomly find when they're doing their routine checks. Is there any effort to go find all the lead surface lines? Because we know they're there, but the law is that they only have to fix it when they stumble upon it. And if you're a company that has to fix it when you stumble upon it, you're going to not stumble upon it. So
Yeah,
that's not
MSD is a very difficult organization to work with.
Yeah.
So they don't even inspect their sewers in general for collapses. When I had a lawsuit against them some time back, and when I asked in a deposition that was on the record, I asked Martoni, who's the head of the water department here in the city and oversees the sewers at the time, and I asked him, what are we doing to look at these sewer lines to prevent these collapses? He said, we wait for them to collapse. And that's how we know when we have an old sewer that's at risk of collapsing because it collapses. And so, we had to end up suing the city at the time in a cause action called inverse condemnation. Now, way in the weeds with it because MSC also has, they'll claim sovereign immunity, basically. They work with the city. They say you can't really sue us because you're suing the city, and you have to get the city's permission to sue the city in the city court. And so it's a real mess. But there are ways to make them do things. It's just complicated, and you have to. It's complicated and expensive.
So that you just can't get them to go look for that surface lines.
It would be. I would really doubt it unless some folks at the state level got a real stick there, because right now it's carrots.
Yeah.
But I think at the state level, if there is a desire to fix MSD, and it's kind of frustrating because I think anyone who knows the history of St. Louis knows that MSD was once one of the best things about St. Louis. We were so ahead of our time with the sewer system, and we've just not made any investment into it over the last 100 years. And now we're left with a sewer system that's so problematic that the EPA fines us every year.
Yeah.
And so there's a real, something's got to give. And I think what's going to happen is either the feds are going to have to come in and say we're done fining you, do something about this, or else the state is going to have to say, all right, we're going to set aside some serious money to address these issues.
Okay, thank you. And I like that you're writing this down. Mine is a mistake.
I've been, we had a little rain in St. Louis a few weeks ago, and I've been on the phones with the engineers at MSC, and I was talking to some folks at utilities today. And then, the little bit of experience that I have renovating houses and replacing sewer laterals. So I'm listening to you. I'm taking some notes. I need to really try and connect A and B. Lead in the sewer, I'm not sure is exactly the problem, but lead in drinking water, filtered water, would definitely be what we're talking about. And I've also been talking to some plumbers about the lead lines coming to our houses and what the plan is to replace them. So I've got a lot of homework ahead of me. Thank you, though. Good question.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Before we move on, though, from Brett, I just want to say that I went to a little event on Monday that was a campaign kickoff for Brett and Ryan running for 4th Ward Alderman. So that is in the works officially now.
I'm actually running now.
Yeah. I kept wanting to say it, but couldn't. Official now. So right now, I think Joe Lucaro has said he's running, but I don't know if he's made that official. So right now we have likely a 2-person race and maybe more up the road, we don't know. So, and just really quick, I wanted to announce, this is Del Taylor, who just won for our district. So, well, for some of our districts, anyway. Donna Barringer, who you know well, right, has the other part of the district, and she is uncontested, I believe, in the general.
I believe so.
Yeah, and you are uncontested. So, there we have it. And someone else won something last night. Yeah.
Don't look so bad.
Yeah. Come on, don't look for it. So every 2 years, all the committees, including Central Committee, elect new leadership. And that's in our bylaws. That's what we do. So Carla May was reelected as the chair. Rasheen Eldridge was reelected as the vice chair. Steve Lenevey was reelected as treasurer. And then our longtime secretary, Kathy Gamache, decided not to run again. She had been doing this since the late 90s. She deserves to be done. She decided not to run again, and the chair asked me to run to replace her, which I did. So I am the secretary of the St. Louis City Central Committee for the next 2 years. And then Amy Hilgeman is the new sergeant at arms, so she's also new to the board. So we've got some folks carrying over from the last 2 years, a couple new folks on the board. We spent like the first hour after this meeting ended in the parking lot talking about all the things we need to do. Because it's a ton of work, and Central Committee is in a real state of transition. Because all the committee folks, right now we still have officially 51. There's 5 vacancies, including the 24th Ward committee man right now. We don't run again until August of 2024, even though all of the alders run next spring. So we're like Schrodinger's committee people for the year in between. We've already sent wards that don't actually exist anymore. So it's messy, but I'm excited to be on the board in a time where we're looking at ward consolidation, and that committee is going to look very different when we go down to 14 wards, not 28, because then we will have 28 committee people and not 56. So, I'm a little intimidated. That's why I'm not like, yeah, let's do this. It's, but it's a huge opportunity, and I'm kind of one of those people where, like, if I'm not super happy with the way things are being run, I typically will go help instead of criticize. And that's just kind of what it is. I'm going to try my best to sort of help the committee and put us in a better place, and get some documents all in one central location so it's easier for the public to access, and committee folks to access, and just sort of kind of modernize some of these things. And that's kind of my goal, is to go into the next couple of years and do everything I can to help the committee, and then we'll figure it out, because I don't know what comes after that. But one other thing I wanted to mention while we're here, because I was just looking at my calendar before we meet again as a group. We have yet another citywide election, and this is the ballot. Sorry, my name is Charlie Rick. Very short. It's a special election for a president of the Board of Aldermen.
2 people running, top 2 advance, right?
Right. So it's a non-election election. I would never say that an election doesn't matter, but it does.
I mean, that's the definition of an election. It doesn't matter.
If one of these 2 candidates took literally every vote in the city, they would still both advance to that November ballot. And it's a weird glitch with Prop B that there is not a provision if there's only 2 candidates, or if one of those 2 candidates gets a certain percentage in the primary. Prop D didn't account for that. So
because this election is under the property rules, we have 2 candidates running to a special election primary, and no matter what happens, both those candidates are also on the ballot in November. But this is, like I said, I would never say it doesn't matter, because I always think you should vote. But here's the things that I would say to think about. One, a lot of polling locations changed in the primary. A lot of you probably saw that. This is a really good opportunity to figure out, if you did vote in the primary, figure out where your polling location is ahead of November. Figure out where you're going to park, what are the logistics, kind of make your plan, because we all know there's going to be a bigger voter turnout in November, and you need to kind of plan your day, right? So,
And I always say it's gonna get in the habit of voting every
Right.
time, no matter what, and to ask your neighbors to get in the habit of doing that as well.
I guarantee you're probably not gonna have to wait in line for this.
Yeah. But on that note, I just wanted to say that in the last election, our 4th ward, our new 4th ward, did have 30.9% turnout.
it was above the city average.
Which, yeah, the city average is 24%. So, it's, I know those numbers don't sound high, but that is actually high, like for a typical vote, and so that, I would say that our ward is up there on like one of the highest turnouts in the city. So we need to keep that momentum going and really like try to keep it going, because if we just don't vote, then, it's gonna be harder to get people out to vote the next time. So,
Jamie,
just
like,
piggyback on
locations
that.
open, they're gonna look at who shows up. You wanna keep your locations open, you wanna, to demonstrate that, if you hold an election, they will come. And I've missed 2 elections since I was able to vote over 50 years ago. And, none of them were a major one. Once I was in the hospital suddenly, and another time my boss would let me off, but it was something like this. It was very close to that kind of an election. And she lived in the county, she had no idea the city, so she really didn't.
well, and
Before, I agree with you. The good turnout is great. It's phenomenal. We still have so much further to go with that. And, these statewide initiatives prove that, these democratic measures can pass. We can get statewide candidates if we're getting out the vote, if we're pressing and pushing more people to get out and vote.
Let's talk about that, because the laws have changed, and I don't think that we can do exactly what we used to do.
right, so that's
with
another
voter
announcement we were
registration.
gonna do.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that was the other thing I was gonna mention was, and correct me if I'm wrong, the new voter ID laws go into effect at the end of August.
Yeah.
So they will be enforced in the September election.
Right.
So again, sort of the practice getting ready for November, make sure you have your ID that's gonna qualify under the new laws, make sure you know where you're going. All
It'll
of
be
these.
my first time showing an ID in, I don't know how many years, since I legally had to before, whenever that was. So frustrating. I love to show that voter card.
And then also what I think you were getting at, Francine, was the registering voters.
Yeah, there's a limit.
There's a limit, and you have to file with the
I
state.
think there's a limit if you're getting paid.
Yeah, I think if you're a
If you're
volunteer, there's not.
volunteering, I think you're fine, but and don't quote me on that. I think
It says more than 10, but it doesn't even say
You're a lawyer.
10 per election, 10 per year, 10 per day, 10 per hour, 10 per week. It just says if you're registering more than 10 over the next 40 years. It doesn't say. I don't
We've
get it
heard-
to
I
clarify
think there's a
that.
real First Amendment issue there.
Yeah.
So,
I'm gonna register people.
I'd be happy to get arrested.
Yeah.
Well, my whole thing is, like, how would it be proven that you helped somebody register to vote? You know what I mean? Like, how would?
Well, what about, like you have, we were talking about this in a meeting, so we direct people to go online and register.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, you could even be held accountable for that, like if you direct more than a number of people to vote online, to register online.
I mean, I suspect that, well, you would know better than me, but I suspect that part of the are going to get called up in the court. I think this is probably part of it.
If a prosecutor ever is active.
Prosecute it, yeah. Because that's what happened the last set of my deep law, was it, there was one election where it was required, and then it got held up in the courts.
I mean, I think
Well-
there are Facebook posts, you know, that encourages more than 10 people to register to vote.
Right.
I mean, my whole thing is like heavy person, you know?
Well, and I don't know in our circles that we're gonna run into someone who's really paying attention and trying to catch people doing that. Now, certainly in some parts, like I think where my mom lives, someone might be standing there watching, like counting how many people get registered to vote, right? Like certain, like that's in rural Missouri, but like, I don't think in St. Louis, maybe you're not gonna run into it so much, right? But in some areas of the state, you might, which is why it was created, right? To be more voter intimidation, like, it was not created because they wanted to like keep better track of things, you know?
I mean, the state got real bent out of shape, the state house got real bent out of shape when Missouri voters passed
Oh, yeah.
medical marijuana and then Medicaid expansion back to back after.
Clean Missouri.
Yeah,
Clean
clean really.
Yeah, after the legislature drug its feet on it for 2 decades.
Marijuana's on it this ballot too.
Yeah,
so
there's,
That'll be, yeah. So the reason why I'm asking also is because, okay, so Joan Lipkin is gonna have a major event at, the History Museum, September 24th. And it's the Dance to Vote Midterms Missouri, Midterms Matter. Well, you know, we're gonna be out there trying to register voters. And so what would be the, you know, is there a process that we have to follow that's different than what we have done in the past? And also, what about the new voter IDs? You know,
The voter ID law will be in effect. I think it's hard to talk much about the voter registration just because right now we're kind of completely in hypothetical territory on that. We haven't seen anyone prosecuted for it or what that prosecution
Right,
looks
sort of
like, or
early.
what judges think about it, or
yeah.
you know, because if I were to put on my judge hat, I'd say this is a clear First Amendment violation. I'm throwing this out.
Right.
And if you don't like it, take it up with the Court of Appeal. But not every judge agrees with, you know, everything. I found that to be the case over my career. But you know, I think it's I can't imagine at the end of the day a court of last refuge saying, no, you're not allowed to register people to vote in a democracy.
But if you're, it seems to me that you would be really safe if you gave out little file cards and said, you know, go here
With
to
the QR
register on
code.
vote, and you just give them the
Well,
card.
and that all depends
Then
on,
you
you know,
didn't-
what is helping
but you
them
didn't
register
reg-
to vote.
But you didn't,
you know.
no, it says you can't register them, it doesn't say you can't help.
Mhm.
So if I just give you the address, I have no idea if you register or not.
Right.
It's, you know.
I was also
would-
wondering if you just hold like a laptop or a
Yeah,
tablet and they're on the site and you just hand it to them, like, you're not actually doing it.
Well, and we talked about in central committee, you know, is it a clipboard? Like, can you hand them the clipboard with the form? And verbally, you can see what they're doing. So you can say, hey, I think you missed a box in this line.
Right.
Check it. Like, you can sort of, you know, guide them through.
That's so true, because when I filled out these forms, you remember when we
Yeah.
voted registration, one of the